All right, guys, it's finally time. It's finally time for the most annoying fight with the worst loot in the entire tier. That being, of course, Ascendant Council with your old buddies Ignatius and Falutius, the fucking most extra names of all time. So this fight's super annoying. I'd probably overheal it if you can, just because the DPS doesn't really matter. And the last phase is like it's fine to overheal, I think, especially with the current gear levels. This fight is like kind of super chaotic, especially the first couple times you pull it, but there's really not that honestly that much going on if you just kind of like focus down and once you learn it a little bit and get used to it, it's not too complicated. For builds here, I would go basically just the standard builds for this. There's not too much tank damage, so you can kind of like drop inspiration if you want as a priest. Although, like, honestly, there's not that much healer check stuff on this fight, really, except in the last phase. So, yeah, basically just standard builds all across the line for all the healers. Standard pre-pull stuff. There's going to be a little bit of raid damage at the beginning, so it's worth to, like, pre-shield a little bit, pre-hot a little bit. Main things you have to look out for as a healer. If you get the little, like, well, I'll talk about it as we go through the VOD here. So again, pre-pull, just pre-hot, pre-shield, stuff like that. I could be pre-shielding a bit more aggressively here, but you know, whatever. This is like our third pull this boss, I think, on this re-clear. We're having a little bit of trouble on it, honestly. It's really annoying, and yeah, honestly, like this is probably the last heroic you should be attempting. Prog Nef before you prog AC, just because it's really annoying. There's a lot of things to learn, and the loot is like really not worth unless you have like a boomy that really wants the caster trinket or whatever. Pretty much nothing else from this boss is like really that good anyways. Although it is pretty cheesable with like higher and higher gear. Let's go to the pull here. So there's a couple things as a healer you should be focusing on in this first phase. So depending on how you play the fight, you could have different positioning here, but this is just how we do it. We have a range spread in two different groups, and then we have the melee, obviously, in melee. And then we have like the middle cleared, like where the star is. And if you get the two bosses that are up in the air are going to put two debuffs on people. One of them's called like electric something, and one of them's like gravity something. Basically, just the two will get marked if you have a Fogies or like give you a save bubble or whatever. It'll show up on raid frames as well. If you get it, you just run to star, you stack on each other, and they clear each other. The only thing to mention here, the like electric one just does a little bit of damage. It's really not a big deal at all. Doesn't really matter if you hit people with it. It's just you just heal it up. But the gravity one will give everyone around you as you're running through the raid to get to star 10-second long haste debuff that's really annoying, make your DPS really unhappy and your healers really unhappy. So if you get that, you just have to be super quick about running out of the raid. It won't pulse for like a couple, I think it's like two seconds or something. So if you're quick about getting out of the raid, you will not hit anyone with the haste buff. Also, if you have like a bunch of H-Pals in melee, that gravity thing can target the H-Pals, and so you can spread it to all the melee, which is really bad. So if you're an H-Pal, when that gravity core, here it is, there's the timer. When you see this timer is about to go down as an H-Pal, you just run out of melee, or just don't be in melee at all. So that's the main mechanic. There's a secondary mechanic, which is that there's like two fire and a frost debuff. And if you get for healers, you're pretty much going to be out in ranged, right? So if you get the, you can see this is this blue debuff here. If you get this, just run into melee, sit in melee for a while, and then dispel yourself, and then run back out. And then there's a fire one. If the fire one goes into melee, the melee just runs out, spreads it in the range, and then you dispel it, and then they run back in. Really, only one of the healers in your raid has to know anything about that mechanic because they can just be the one dispelling it, and then you don't really have to care about it too much. So just if you are not like the sweatiest, just hope that somebody else in your raid knows how to do it and has dispel. Again, this is a good fight rather to have dispel talented as a holy paladin, shaman, druid, etc., just in case you need to be a backup dispel. So you can see, I'm going to back up a little bit. You can see gravity core is about to go out here, and you're going to see I get the gravity core, and it says gravity core, and you go to whatever, and then you stack up, and it says clear, and then you can spread out again. So pretty simple, just a little stack mechanic there. Healing on this fight is really, this phase one, there's just not that much damage going out. So it's mostly just a little bit of tank damage and a little bit of damage on the melee, a tiny bit of like raid damage, really not too much going on. The one other thing to mention here is that you can see these little like blue globby things that he's like kind of spraying out on everybody. If you get hit by one of these, it'll give you a debuff that looks like a bubble. You can see here one of the DKs got the bubble on them. If you get this little bubble thing, you just have to run to the fire. And as soon as you take damage from the fire, it'll like burn the bubble off of you and then it will disappear. So that's the one other thing. If you don't do it and the bubble sits on you for long enough, you'll get like a deep freeze and it'll do a bunch of damage. If that does happen, as a healer, you can just like PS them or like hand sack. You can see here, it actually goes out here. So this like deep freeze thing that is shiny on my raid frames. The reason it's shiny is because it does a bunch of damage. So I think I PS him. I shield PS and then I send a penance. He does block it, so I didn't have to PS there, but it's a good thing to just reflexively PS. Yeah, if you do see that, just bomb heals into them and they shouldn't die. So that's phase one. Again, a lot of stuff going on, but like honestly, once you pull it a few times, it's not really that overwhelming. The bosses have to be killed at the same time, but like honestly, as a healer, you don't have to pay attention to that because you're not really doing damage, so who cares? And then once one of them gets to 25%, they're going to like dirtle around for a little while and then teleport up, and then the other two that are up there are going to come down. And then here, this second phase is a little bit more chaotic and a little bit more high stakes because there's a couple of mechanics here that are like basically one-shot mechanics. And if you fuck them up, like you can either kill the entire raid or kill yourself really quickly. So there's two main things that are going on here that you have to pay attention to, and they actually both matter to healers. So it's not like the first phase where you can kind of ignore the DPS stuff. There's Quake, and the other, I can't remember what the other one is, but yeah, you can see up here Quake get in the air. So the bosses will spawn a tornado and then like a little weird little like sucky anything that I'll show you when it spawns. Fuji, if you have Fujis, it'll just tell you exactly what to do. But basically for the first thing, you have to get in the tornado. And then after the tornado, the Quake goes out, you just have to go into the grounding thing, and then you just alternate back and forth. It always is the same order. It's always Quake first, so you always have to get tornado first. And then after tornado, it's always the other one, and then it just alternates back and forth. So it's pretty easy to just know what you have to do next and just like kind of remember the order. You don't really need the weak order to tell you, but it's nice to have. The other mechanic is there's a little like frost orb thing that will spawn and it will fixate on a random person. And then after the orb spawns, like a couple seconds after, you'll get a little like flame strike thing that spawns on the ground. It has a little icon that looks like the rocket barrage from like Mimiron. It's actually kind of hard to see, especially if there's a bunch of like mongoloid DKs spawning death and decay everywhere. It can be a little hard to see. And it's kind of annoying because the frost orb will wipe your entire raid if it hits somebody. Rather the person it's fixated on. If you're not fixated, you can run into it here. So you can see here, I get it. And I think this is the pull where I actually mess it up. So this is a really good example of like what not to do. I boots and I'm trying to kite around and I just don't make it. So that's what happens if you play poorly like I do and you hit it, it wipes the whole raid. So I'm going to skip to the pull where we actually kill the boss. All right, so here's our phase 2 on the pull we actually kill the boss, where I don't eat the orb. So that orb will speed up the longer it exists in the world. So it eventually becomes unkiteable, especially like priest, you're super waddler. So like you can see where I messed up there. I used boots and I just like ran into a tornado I couldn't see because it was right on the boss, got knocked up, and then I wasted my boots and then I got hit. So if somebody isn't able to kite, you can grip them. So it's a good idea as a priest to be positioned like where the flame strike is and be ready to grip. So basically what you do with that orb is you just kite it over the flame strike and they both disappear. So we'll see that here on the successful pull. Also worth mentioning that you should have the like air and grounded thing tracked on your raid frames. And if somebody's in the wrong stance, like if they're grounded when they should be air or they're air where they should be grounded, you can put a shield on them and they'll probably live. So again, I'm going to back up a little bit. You can see the orb spawns. It's chasing our Shadow Priest. That's the Flame Strike icon right there. So pretty unfortunate spawn there. It spawned like right where the orb was, and he just kited it into it, and it disappears. You can see here we just got a quake, so now we're gonna get grounded. We're gonna get another frost orb. It's on the feral, which is really nice. Obviously, feral has really high move speed and sprint and boots, so he just boots us around and kites it to the flame strike. You should definitely save your boots for this. This is a very good reason why you should be engineering as well. Boots are just really, really good. For healing here, there's not really any damage going out unless people are really messing up the Quake and the Thundershock thing. And if they are doing that, they're usually just going to get one shot anyways, so not too much to heal. You can just sort of spin your wheels, mana neutral healer. Here, you want to be going into the last phase with really high mana and all your cooldowns if you can. So again, pretty good to just spin your wheels here and not too much damage going out. One other thing you should also pay attention to in this phase is the lightning conduit or whatever it is. 3 people will get a debuff. They just have to run into the raid. It's that simple. If you get the debuff, just run into the raid. The range on it's not too big, but yeah, you can just run out to like the outside here and everybody else can be in this central circle. So yeah, that's not too complicated. So when you push the second set of dudes, one of them past 25%, they will like fuse together to form Captain Planet. Then you kill them when they're fused together. If there's a frost orb out when it freezes you all like this, don't worry. If it hits you when you're in the little purple thing stunned, it won't do damage. Although if it's perfectly timed and spawns at exactly the right time, orb is like traveling towards you and you drop the purple bubble and it hits you, it will wipe the raid. So that did happen to us once on Prague, but it's very unlikely. It's just like a super random timing thing that can be perfectly aligned. So you can see here they're gonna fuse together to form Captain Planet, and then after they fuse together, they're gonna do a bunch of raid damage. The tank is gonna kite them around the room. They're gonna drop a bunch of puddles. Just don't stand in the puddles, and do a bunch of HPS. The boss also chain lightnings. You can see that chain lightning there. So you want the range to be spread out. You ideally want the healers to be like centrally located so that they can heal everybody, and the deep range DPS to be in a circle around the healers. Range DPS that can move, so like hunters, Ellie shamans, classes like that, should be like in front of the boss kiting so that there's more room for people to spread for chain lightning. Melee should be like spread out around the boss, and obviously healers should be somewhere central so that they can be ranging everybody. And this is where you're going to be wanting to pop all your cooldowns and have a bunch of mana that you can spend. Really good here for Resto Druid to have a tree form into a tree form Tranquility. The other thing in this phase, again, you want to stay out of these puddles. They do a bunch of damage. When the boss spawns, all these little tiny fire things, they're kind of hard to see. Again, especially if you've got a bunch of mongoloids dropping a bunch of projected textures everywhere. But you just want to be not on top of these little tiny fire things because they will explode and do a bunch of damage. So usually I won't one-shot you if you're like at max HP, but there's a bunch of raid damage going on here, so just don't tempt fate and don't stack on them. For priest healing, you're going to want to mostly be spamming POH here just because it's the highest throughput, but if you have to move around and you can't get good range, you can him, you can press power word shield, stuff like that. So not too much atonementing here just because it's not the highest throughput, right? You want to be just really blasting. And you can see if you have a decent amount of gear, the boss falls over really quick. Although we are getting kind of gassed here. The other thing that happens in this phase is this like gravity crush. So usually you only get one of these if you're doing a lot of damage. It'll just lift 3 people into the air, do a bunch of damage, and then they get fall damage if they fall down. So if they don't have a like NG cloak, which you should have, right, to just parachute, you can grip them to reduce fall damage. Although if you grip somebody, it means there's another person on top of you for chain lightning, so just be careful of that. It's possible you can grip somebody and then just get chain lightning and instantly die, so be careful. You can also slow fall, levitate, stuff like that. But yeah, you can see it's basically just a DPS, HPS race here. And that's Ascendant Council. Again, it's kind of a lot of mechanics, but if you do all the mechanics right, it's really not that hard. And the healing HPS check stuff is really not hard at all for the fight until the last phase. Pretty high on healer count for this, just because of that last phase usually in most groups. So for the first 2 phases, you can really just focus on avoiding things, not standing in fire, not messing up the debuff, because you're going to have a bunch of healing and not that much damage going out. So good luck on prog. Again, this boss is super annoying. It doesn't really drop great loot, so probably the last one you're going to be progging.